So recently, CBRE, which is a large commercial firm that does a lot of different things, marketing properties, they do appraisals, market studies. They're quite involved heavily in real estate on all aspects, office, commercial, multi-residential.
Yep.
They hosted an event in Halifax, and a developer stood up with some pushback and some words for the city here.
I couldn't make it, and I'm so gutted because I read the transcript, and I was like, my gosh, I would have done that thing where, like, I would have stood up on the desk like, oh, Captain, my Captain, like, did that whole thing, the slow clap, like.
And I think a lot of people were there, and a lot of people were afraid to do that, though, because they didn't want to upset anybody. But it was good that the big developer stood up. He's one of the not largest, but he's definitely one of the big players in the city.
He's one of the largest.
He's one of the largest, exactly.
Yeah.
I don't know if he is the largest. I don't want to drop any, whatever. I don't know. But he's in that wheelhouse. And one thing he made, which I thought was an interesting point, is for essential things, essential products and services or whatever, there's no HST on them. But housing, oddly enough, and there is HST in Halifax, but in other cities, like I don't think in Toronto, there's no HST on their housing projects.
Interesting.
Because housing's an essential requirement.
Yes, it's like milk and books.
Yeah, and my thing is again, this is the same thing where I'm sure a lot of people will give us the feedback that like, oh, like the builders make lots of money, they should pay the HST.
Yeah.
The 15% boils down to your rent. Your rent's also going to be 15% higher to just cover it. That's all that happens. It's not... It just gets passed down the line. So I was just curious, like...
Yeah, that'll just be right as like, oh, developers want a big tax break. It's like, no, what we're all agreeing is that this needs to come down in price.
Yeah.
Price is input and output.
Yeah.
Your input pricing, your output pricing. They move together.
Yeah.
15% on something that you're saying you're trying to make more affordable for people. I understand the rationale. Do I think it's realistic? No. But his point stands.
Yeah.
And he had a few other points there, some of them a lot more aggressive in his language, and he was tackling the things with or commenting on this paying for bonusing
Density.
for affordability, and you could all of a sudden build buildings higher and all these things. And yeah, it's great. That sentiment is growing. That sort of enough is enough, speak some sense to these things and put out these viewpoints that are maybe not popular, but they're right. And there's people who know what they're talking about.
Well, it's getting to a point where like on a $20 million project, almost $5 million of it goes to the government. Probably, if not more, realistically.
Yeah.
And it's just like, what is happening from that money?
So let's talk about taxes, Neal.
I was going to say,
now that you got me all worked up.
Chandler, I think I've gotten Chandler fired up now. He's ready to throw some punches. We should get a little speed bag next time.
Yeah, I had a rough night too.
Yeah.
I had a rough night. I'm wearing the same clothes as I wore yesterday.
I don't know if we want the full story.
No, evidently is also the same shirt as I wore in the previous podcast, though I have the same shirt in multiple different colors, but all slight variations of the color navy. Like, I think this is black, not navy, but I'm like Inspector Gadget. I open the closet and there's the same shirt over and over again.
On the topic of taxes.
Yeah.
Nice shirt, though. I love your shirt. Great shirt. Looks good. Everyone let them know the shirt looks good.
Thank you.
On top of that, so not only do we actually pay those taxes, they proposed effectively a 6% property tax increase across the board. Not just for landlords, for residential homeowners, commercial buildings, commercial spaces, everybody. 2.9% of it's an actual increase in taxes to go towards services. And the other 3% is towards what they call a climate action tax, which again, nobody within Canada, no other province has what's called a climate action tax. We would be the first to do so. We already pay some of the highest property taxes in Canada at a rate of effectively 1.2%, I believe it was what it works out to.
1.26, give or take.
1.26%. And then I forget what it is for commercial. It kind of varies, but around, was it 3
Yeah, I don't know what that is but
it's over 3%. Anyways, so yeah, they're looking at doing a 6% tax. I'll let you speak on it first. Thoughts?
So again, what confuses me about this is...
It's proposed, by the way. It's not in yet.
Yeah. And this is what people do when this is kind of a back and forth. So staff recommended this, which means a bunch of people who all make six figures down at the city council are like, there just doesn't seem to be enough money to go around. I don't understand why. And they propose this tax hike, and the councillors get to say, oh, well, gosh, I'm going to oppose that to get it down a little bit. And I think the mayor said, oh, no, maybe like 3.7. I mean, we know it won't be 3.7, but maybe we try to get it closer to 3.7, blah, blah. So the 4.5 or whatever we end up with at the end is going to look like a win by some person's imagination. And we're going to have this big tax increase. Again, I just don't understand how people can look at these things and not connect A to B and see what some of the other problems might be, because a lot of this gets laid at the feet of the private sector and landlords and all this. And yet you have things like this, which you'd think for someone looking in and be like, well, maybe that's a little issue right there. Because we're saying we want housing to be more affordable for owners. We want it to be more affordable for tenants. And we increase property taxes. And we say we want to encourage more rental stock. And permitting has never been higher. It's been jacked through the roof. We say we want to encourage home ownership and make that more attainable for young people. And there's talk about raising deed transfer tax by upwards of 25% or 33%.
Which is already enormous.
And there's money that's being given to developers, but the government hasn't committed to build not one single unit that they would own and operate and run at a loss themselves. So you get to this point where what the government is saying and what they're doing are in contradiction. And I don't care how you feel about your landlord. Just set that aside for a second. I just don't understand how someone could look at that and say there's not something else going on here. And meanwhile, a report came out that there were over 400 units, public housing units in Nova Scotia sitting empty.
Yeah.
So explain how this makes sense and how could they get away with doing this? And the way they got around it and the way they can do this is by calling it a climate change tax, because they're worried about getting all these angry woke people online to get on their Twitter fingers and start yelling at the councillors again. And so they was like, oh, call it a climate change tax, and be like, oh, those same people will be like, well, we can't argue against the climate change tax because we're pro, all this stuff. Okay. But it's crazy, man. It's crazy.
I got a couple things I got to say, but regarding the climate change tax, I get it. I'm all for it. But on the flip side, the reason I'm not all for necessarily putting up 3% right now, but they have all these things they want to do. We have so many bigger issues right now than electric buses.
Thank you. This is the
these would be things we do. Okay, so the city's everything's going really well. We're covering all of our other problems. All right, now we're going to implement an electric bus system. But instead, they're like, all right, we got all these tents, but how nice would it be if we had 60 electric buses around town that you all paid for?
Yeah, so you have to prioritize. While we're trying to build this socialist green utopia, that's all great. We don't have the money. Yeah. We don't have the money. And I don't understand, does anyone down at the city know the word cutback? Because I haven't heard the word cutbacks uttered in forever.
No.
Right? I don't remember the last time that was in the news. I think they're going to be cutbacks, because there's only two ways for council, the city, the municipality to handle cash flow, right? You either increase revenue, i.e. taxes, or you have cuts. And they just don't seem to think the latter exists anymore. So it's all tax-based. But what is our priority? I was under the impression, based on what everyone talks about and what's in the news, was that housing was the priority. So why are we going out of our way to make housing more expensive? To be abundantly clear, property tax revenue has never been higher in the history of our city. It's never been higher because houses have never been more expensive. So that 6% tax increase that we're talking about, that's 6% tax on top of the, 20% appreciation in home values?
2 years in a row.
Right?
Yeah.
So that revenue has never been higher ever. Detransfer tax has never been higher ever. And all of a sudden, we still have no money? We're short money?
Yeah.
So something has changed because the revenue intake is higher than ever, and yet the expenditure, we can't keep up. We can't afford these buses. And I'm not saying these aren't good initiatives. It's prioritization. We said, why are we making housing and real estate more expensive at this time right now? I don't get it.
Constantly. Yeah, exactly. I don't understand. It is funny. Of the $700 million that they say they need to cover, $400 million of it is towards 250 electric buses. That one I feel like is just so ridiculous when you have what's going on in the city right now. And no. We're going to get you these unreal buses. And I'm like, do we need to? Is that a focus right now?
Well, listen, I've been adamant that part of an affordable city is a city that metro, that transit's a big part of.
100%.
Right? But we have to prioritize.
Yes.
You can't be all things to all people at all times when we are on a budget unless we do things like just jack the taxes. But this idea that there are no consequences to that, it just got more expensive for people to live in their homes. It got more expensive it's already been way more expensive to build new rental stock. The increased property taxes are going to slowly get passed down to tenants one way, shape, or the other.
Yep.
And what about all the commercial tenants out there who are on triple net leases?
Exactly.
right? They're going to get jacked. Like, you want these businesses to try to survive, and they're just going to get hit with this massive property tax increase. Because if you're a commercial tenant, oftentimes you're on a triple net lease. That means you pay the property tax.
And they have a stat here. Commercial taxes on average would rise of $2,500. So that's on average. The average business now is going to take another kick of $2,500. The thing that I think I found, I want to say funny, is the 2.9%. They said need to be put in due to the considerable effect from inflation.
Oh my gosh, isn't that rich?
Which is funny because on the flip side, we got 2% rent control.
Yeah.
And everyone's freaking out because we have inflation. Like, we can't pay our bills. So the city's increasing their income by 3% to try and mitigate some of the expense increase that they're facing. But they've now limited the whole private sector to a 2% increase.
So do you know why they say they have these 400 units? Because again, I think that bears repeating. There are more than 400 empty public housing units in the province of Nova Scotia right now, sitting empty. Yeah. And part of the reason is like, oh, we can't find tradespeople to do it, and we kind of don't have the money because it seems like everything in the rental world, in the real estate world, has gone up in price. It's like, no kidding.
Yeah, but
no kidding.
2% lock. Let's go.
So everyone who's now like way up in their insurance costs, they're now going to be up in their property tax as well. They're already way up in their permitting while everything else is already inflated. And somehow they think this is an environment that is conducive to making housing more affordable. And the only thing they're going to do is, one, they're going to continue to distract you, because how could they get away with something like this is the obvious question. Like, how aren't people more upset about this? And there's been some pushback, but like not the sort of pushback that you get. This doesn't get as much hits or traction on an article about this as, some landlord lost in a small claims about a $500 security deposit.
In one unit.
That'll get
in one unit.
Yeah, that'll get like 1,000 likes and comments, whatever. And this, people don't even seem to notice or care. This has real world ramifications
on 1 million people.
On 1 million people, and no one will notice it because, one, just call it a climate change tax, because all those keyboard warriors can't be possibly angry about a climate change tax. And two, they just know you're still going to be distracted blaming landlords for all this problem. I don't care what you think of your landlord, whether you love them, hate them. Look at this in a vacuum and ask yourself, like, is this something that I think is good for home property affordability, be it renting or owning, in this province right now? And it's just not. Like, of all years to do this, it's crazy. Housing, everyone's assessment's going up. So the government always likes to play this line like, oh, we didn't raise property tax rates this year. We're really good people. We didn't raise them this year. It's like, yeah, because the price of housing has been going up so much every single year that they've been getting all these inflationary increases in property tax. That's BS to cry poor on inflation, because all the houses just inflated in value. And as such, the tax base has just gone way up. So they're making all this more money. Like, they've never brought in more money.
The other thing is they're using a tax assessment value for their numbers from like previous years, like from the last year.
They know that's going to
the next ones come out, they're going to be 25, 30% higher.
Yeah.
So they're showing it as a windfall of $120 per person, but it'll likely be another 20% on top of that.
Yeah, the property that I just purchased went up 25% in property tax between 2019 and 2020, and then went up a more modest, maybe 10% last year, and I bought it, so now it's going to get jacked way up. Like,
30%.
They've been making this money.
Yeah.
Right? So, I don't know. I don't know what to say. But like, it's just so frustrating that people don't even they won't even notice this sort of thing.
When I was broke, I had rich habits.